Hey everybody, welcome to this week's podcast. This week we're going to be talking about David Michael Kruger, also known by his birth name Peter Woodcock. He was born March 5th, 1939 in Peterborough, Ontario. His mother was a 17-year-old factory worker. She breastfed him for 1 month and gave him up for adoption.
Hey everybody. As a newborn, showed he had feeding problems and cried constantly. Peter lived in many foster homes as an infant, showed signs at the time of severe emotional trauma. He was unable to bond with any of his foster families. So after his first birthday, he became terrified of anyone approaching him, and his speech was incoherent and mostly kind of like animal sounds.
Yeah, that sounds terrible. So right from the start.
Yeah, literally right from the get-go.
Yeah.
Just having problems. He was also physically abused by one of his first foster parents. At the age of 2, Peter would have to be given medical attention and treatment for an injured neck.
2 years old, imagine that.
He found a permanent foster home at the age of 3 with the Maynard family. At the age of 5, he found it hard to adjust to social situations, even within his foster home, and he was bullied a lot.
Yeah, so it was the other children that lived in that foster home and kids in the neighborhood, so he was picked on right away.
Which is always tough for any child, regardless whether they come out of it.
I hate bullies. I hate it. I wish it never happened. I think we've all been there. Some of us have been bullies, I guess, not me, but I mean, it's just shouldn't happen. It's awful.
Yeah. It's an unfortunate, I guess it's kind of like a trait of humanity, I suppose.
Unfortunately.
Yeah. So the Maynard family would regularly bring him to the hospital for sick children in Toronto, where he would receive treatment. He was sent to a private school, but again was unsuccessful making friends or interacting socially.
That's rough.
Yeah.
Jeez.
He just, I don't know, well, and then again, that's right from the get-go, he was having troubles, so.
Yeah, and I feel he's an absolute monster, don't get me wrong, but to think of a child going through all this, you can't help but feel. I know it's him, but, geez, any child going through that, how can you not feel sorry for them?
Well, and considering that, obviously the outside world that you perceive is mostly people who are mistreating you or bullying you, putting you down, it messes with your psyche, that forms your view on life. And
yeah, and this is why this is an interesting case. It's sort of the transition from, especially with the details that we have, it brings right from birth right until death of an absolute monster of a serial killer. So it's fascinating too to see the transition, and you just can't believe another human being can do these things.
Yeah, and that's where, again, although you have those formative years that create your perception of the world around you and your life, who knows where it starts to take a turn like that, like what it is that triggers that type of behavior.
Yeah, well, it seems with a lot of these serial killers, it's the parents, right? A lot of them either had one parent, no parents, raised by grandparents or aunts or uncles, or just nobody, just on their own. So it's all that early development. Not to say a child that didn't get that is going to be a serial killer, but definitely there are a lot of mental health concerns that are going to come out of that, without a doubt.
Yeah.
Those are the nurturing years. You have to nurture. So, and he didn't get any of that. Not right away, anyhow.
Yeah. So by the age of 11, he was described by the Children's Aid Society as an angry little boy. Slight in build, neat in appearance. He had bright, darting eyes, worried facial expressions. He walks briskly, and is misunderstood by other children, which also wouldn't have helped with the bullying.
And that's another thing with these, not all of them, but a lot of these guys are actual geniuses. Not saying that in a good way. I'm just saying,
their minds work to that.
Yeah, different level, right? Different level.
They're educated, but he obviously had too much time on his hands to do the things that he did.
He just didn't have that humanity or anything, He didn't have somebody to show him that. The family that adopted him seemed great. From what I found, they had their flaws as well, but at least they took him in when he was 3, and they stayed with him. So at this point, he's age 11.
Yeah.
Things are already starting to show. In the 8 years that they had him, there isn't a lot of improvement, no matter what they do. So I think it's all downhill from here.
Yeah. So signs of Peter's violent fantasies were noticed at this time as well. A social worker took him on an outing to the Canadian National Exhibition, or CNE as you know it if you're from Ontario or this part of Ontario. And as they were walking through, Peter told his social worker that he wished a bomb would fall on the exhibition and kill all of the children, which, that's a strange thing for an 11-year-old to say.
That's 11 years old.
Yeah. And
he just sort of said it randomly, and obviously she was quite shocked. But this is where we've said it on a few other podcasts. So this is where people start dropping balls. His parents and others are seeing these early signs, and although they are trying to help him, I guess it wasn't enough, because it just led to worse and worse things.
So Peter was sent to a school for emotionally disturbed children in Kingston, Ontario, and began acting on his strong urges with other children. He boasted about having intercourse with a 12-year-old girl when he was 13. When he turned 15, he was discharged from the school and returned home to the Maynard family. He was enrolled back into his original private school, and again, he failed to adjust socially. He was then moved at the age of 16. He went to a public high school where he was recognized by neighborhood bullies. Again, so he probably thought he was clear of them for a while, especially if he was acting on his urges in this school. Going back to kind of a life where he was going to be bullied again must have been...
Well, I mean, thank goodness he had the stable home, because he's certainly being passed around in the school system right now, which was also common back then with problematic kids.
So his teachers described him as a very bright student who often scored 100% on tests in the subjects of science, history, and English.
Yeah, so that's how a lot of the adults described him. So, I mean, and that's good if he would have done good with it.
Yeah, he could have done a lot of good with it. But, again, this is what I'm saying. Like, where does that tipping point go from normal thoughts to these extreme thoughts?
Yeah, well, it's interesting because it also back in the day, and maybe like way back in the day, people who had committed crimes were just sort of known to be like born bad, and they're just going to be bad. It's just what they are. It's just a bad person, so they lock them up forever or just eliminate them.
Yeah.
So, I mean, thank goodness we got out of that era. But, I mean, like I said, it's a good thing that he has a good parental unit, because he's really being passed through the school system here, and things are being ignored to a certain extent.
Yeah, there's already some red flags happening, and unfortunately nobody really acted on them.
You know, this is going back to the 50s, so imagine this was the case today with a young fella, what that would be like. It'd be a totally different story today. So Peter's prized possession was a red and white Schwinn bike, which satisfied his constant need to wander the streets of Toronto. So I don't know about Toronto in the 50s. I've seen a lot of pictures of it. I know there's a few of you watching us, regular watchers, that have lived during that era in Toronto. I mean, it looks interesting. And the Schwinn bike, the red and white, I mean, that was, of course, super popular back then. He even rode his bike in the snow. He concocted a fantasy in which he led a gang of 500 invisible boys on bikes called the Winchester Heights Gang. So he's actually picturing these things. When they did an interview with him, because he did a string of interviews in, I guess it was the 80s, maybe late 80s, he was actually seeing these people. To him, he had friends because he imagined them there. His parents were aware of his fantasies and his urges to wander, but they were very unaware of why he had those urges. So apparently he would take off like quite often and just either get on his bike and ride all over Toronto, or get on the train and just go to different parts of Toronto. And his family was okay with it. He was about 16, 17 about this time when he started to do that. And I guess they thought it was good for him, and Toronto was fairly safe, I imagine, at the time. So they had no idea what was happening there.
Yeah, I mean, just letting him wander like that when they knew he had those urges too, or like...
I think they thought it was a positive thing. Like, I think they thought, okay, he's just trying to find himself, or...
It seems innocent, I guess, right?
Sure.
If you don't know what's going on.
It's 1956, so...
Yeah.
So on September 15th, 1956, 17-year-old Peter was riding his bike on the grounds of the CNE when he met 7-year-old Wayne Millett. He lured the boy out of the sight and committed evil acts. So I say evil acts, it's absolutely evil acts. I'm not going to get into the details of it because if you don't know about it, just a heads up.
It's not easy to hear.
It's very, very bad what he did, and there are other cases that we're going to talk about as well. We're not all about doing that. We love true crime, but we don't feel it necessary to share the gory details, because to us it has really,
it's bad.
It's not what makes it interesting, and This is a really bad one, yeah. So evil acts, I'm sure we can all imagine.
Yep.
The boy's body was found the next day. Another boy was arrested for this crime. He was hastily convicted. Then the conviction was overturned and he was released in 1957. So they thought they'd caught the young man that did this to the 7-year-old Wayne Millett. But it wasn't him.
I wonder why they were so convinced that it was him.
Evidence showed them in the same area about the same time, and it was around the time when they figured the act happened.
Okay.
Police eventually acknowledged that there was a serial predator on the loose in the city.
Big city too. Like, everyone could have been terrified at that time. And
the police take a long time to actually acknowledge things. Things gotta happen before, but I guess they have to let something terrible happen before they'll acknowledge it, which
is unfortunate.
It's unfortunate and quite common.
Yeah.
So on October 6, 1956, Peter was riding his bike around the Cabbagetown district in Toronto when he picked up a 9-year-old Gary Morris. Peter drove them to Cherry Beach, where he committed evil acts. Very evil acts. And, of course, Gary Morris didn't survive. 9-year-old boy. Like,
Yeah,
I don't know.
not even hardly started his own life yet. And it was taken from him.
It's very confusing because you would think, of course, Peter was not in his right mind, but you would think someone who had such a rough childhood would want to hurt another child.
Yeah.
But in this case, at least, it was sort of a jealousy of other kids.
Yeah, maybe, eh?
Kids that had loving parents or parents at all. It was random style, but definitely he knew it was the same kind of targets, the happy children.
Yeah.
That upset him. Police started noticing a pattern of behavior and style of killing and etc., evil acts, between these two cases and then previous cases before that. So they're saying it happens in the same area and it happens in the same way and the body is in the same state, and so like a pattern. On January 19th, 1957, Peter was again riding his bike when he approached 4-year-old Carol Voice, and he offered her a ride on his Schwinn bicycle. So again, I know those Schwinn bicycles because I can picture it, were like quite the thing. But was it rare for people to have them or common? Because it seemed like he used that bike he was like, hey, look at my bike, want to go for a ride? So it must have been, I guess it was rare for people to have them.
I think was probably one of the more expensive brands in those days.
Maybe.
Or at least back then it would have been.
Yeah. He drove her under the Bloor Viaduct, and it was there that her life was taken. And again, extremely brutal. Doesn't need to be mentioned how we're not going to go there with children ever. Actually, we're not really going to go there with anybody, but especially children and animals, no.
Yeah, there's just no need to.
No.
I think anyone really wants to hear that, so.
No, we're trying to be relaxing. Sort of like we're hanging out with you for a little while, chatting, so we're not going to get those gory details. But anyway, that was a bad one. Bad. Heads up, if you're going to be looking up case, just be prepared for that.
Yeah.
So witnesses saw a teenager cycling away from the crime scene of Carol Voice. A composite sketch was created, and it was featured on the front page of the Toronto Star. It would lead to the arrest of Peter on January 21st, 1957, so not too long after that. And I have a picture of that composite, and I'll put it here.
It does. It looks.
It's pretty spot on with him.
It is pretty spot on. Yeah.
Yeah. So he was caught. Thank goodness.
Yeah.
So Peter confessed to all 3 murders. In an interview in, I believe it was 1988-89, he recalled thinking back that his worst fear at the time of being arrested was that his mother, adoptive mother, would find out about what he was doing. That was his worst fear. So,
I didn't think about that while he was doing it, though. Okay.
So Peter was tried only for the murder of Carol Voice. And on April 11th, 1957, after a 4-day trial, he was found not guilty by reason of insanity. So that doesn't mean he's not guilty. It just means that he is considered insane. So he wasn't going to be committed to a federal penitentiary. He was going to be sent somewhere else, and he was sent to the Oak Ridge Division of Maximum Security, Penetanguishene Mental Health Center, and now it is known as Waypoint. And I will put a picture of it up here. Penetang's known for that. We're also known for our super jail. One of the first in the country. Might have been the second in the whole country. So anyway, he was sent up there. So while in prison, Peter was diagnosed as a psychopath. He underwent various forms of psychiatric therapy, including LSD experiments that were popular in the 1960s. And there's a lot about that. I know we have a list of podcasts to do, but that's actually a very, very interesting subject. Since I grew up in this area, I know quite a lot about these LSD experiments and other things that happened up there. The Penetanguishene Mental Health Center, so maybe.
Yeah, you could always do that.
Those experiments that were conducted in the 60s were something else. Yeah, it would be an interesting topic. Anyway, yeah, and it took part right here, right in our backyard. He was given many personality-altering drugs, was subject to personality-breaking therapy, which involved other inmates. This therapy was referred to as 100-day Hayden. Peter did not respond well to any of these treatments, nor was he an ideal inmate. So the 100-day Hayden, pretty much what they would do is have the inmates all together, and they would confront each other, like challenge each other's thoughts and theories about things, and it was really strange, and I'm not sure why it's a therapy. If anything, I think it would cause a lot more disruption, and I think they're trying to get them to interact. I think that's a lot of opening up, especially in that sort of facility, you know.
I mean, I can't imagine being in there as like a sane person listening to them argue with each other about their views, especially if some of them are violent too. Like,
yeah, I just don't understand it, but that's what I know of it anyhow, and it was a real thing. So he engaged in coercive sexual acts and exploited the other inmates, who were often less intelligent or less sane than he. He convinced some of the other inmates that he had a connection to an imaginary gang called the Brotherhood, and that he could initiate the other inmates into the gang by means of certain acts and gifts of cigarettes. So, something about a gang here, like, I guess that was the thing back then. That was the thing that was cool.
Yeah.
And he certainly took advantage of these other inmates,
Manipulative.
Yeah.
Very much so.
Very. So it's weird, right? Because he was found not guilty because he was insane, but then you're like, he's sane enough to do this? Like, manipulate them to that point? Like, know their weak point and take advantage of it? Like,
yeah,
it might have been the wrong sentence for him.
Seems pretty calculating.
He was manipulating people, so insane? Possibly still insane, but definitely sane enough to be able to do this.
Yeah, it takes a certain level of composure to... Because, he didn't just walk right up to the inmates and be like, we're going to do this, or I'm going to do this to you. He knew that he would have to coerce them into doing it.
Yeah.
And had to fool them even, like...
It takes a certain type of planning to do that sort of thing, especially controlling a group of people. So, yeah. Okay, just my, opinion. I always had this fascination with leading a group. So, I mean, he could have easily been some kind of cult leader, had he not been caught. Who knows?
Yeah.
So, for some odd reason, in 1991, Peter was transferred to a less restrictive institution in Brockville, Ontario. The only reason I can think he was transferred there, maybe he was being good, but also he was getting older. The staff took him on outings. He talked about one of the workers at this institution taking him to see Silence of the Lambs at the theater. So what a weird...
It seems like a bad idea.
What a strange movie to take someone who's been put inside for murder, like really brutal style.
Yeah.
I don't know.
It's just...
He must have been good.
Well, yeah, I don't know. We should be taking him to something that's extremely PG, or just no...
How about nowhere?
Yeah,
I know he's a human, but you know what? This one's barely human.
Yeah.
It was during this time he changed his name to David Michael Kruger. And he formed a relationship with Bruce Hamill. So this is a strange one. Bruce Hamill was an Ottawa killer who had been released from Oak Ridge in Penetanguishene. And he was working now at the Ottawa courthouse as a security guard. So wow. He was a killer in Ottawa. Spent time inside at Oak Ridge. And then when he got released, he got a job as a security guard at the courthouse in Ottawa.
Like I said, like a government building too. That's I don't know if I call that an achievement or
It's weird. I mean, maybe he just went, I don't know.
Yeah, maybe that's just what he thought he would be good at, and I don't know, he managed to pull it off, I guess.
The thing is, I don't know how he got that job. It's good that he got released. I guess he, did his thing. But security guard at an Ottawa courthouse. It just doesn't seem right. And it's going to seem even less right when you hear what's going to happen next. Peter met Bruce Hamill, who he knew from being put away in Oak Ridge together, both for murder. Now Bruce is, doing his thing at the courthouse. Peter convinced Hamill to help him kill another inmate at the new institution he was at in Brockville. And the target's name was Dennis Kerr.
On July 13th, 1991, Bruce Hamill went to a hardware store to purchase a plumber's wrench, a hatchet, knives, and a sleeping bag. He then went to the Brockville Institution and signed out Peter, who was then 52 years old, and he took him out on a day pass.
Like, imagine even being able to... I just can't. He's a killer. I just can't.
And he wasn't even being released either. He just left on a day pass. And he was able to pull this off, especially if this other guy had a good job. Like a security guard at the courthouse after being
a killer.
Yeah, a killer, and then he's just immediately was talked into helping him commit this crime, this new crime.
And this one, and this one's getting on a day pass, Peter, how does that even work? How is that even allowed? It's just so weird to me. It goes to show, the law is very specific. He was kind of found not guilty, but he was found insane. So, in that case, if they go through all their therapies and they're deemed sane enough, and they can just get day passes and just get released, right? So, if he were sent to a federal penitentiary, he wouldn't see the light of day. At least not for about 20, 30 years. And then he can go in front of the parole board. But... you know what? He's almost lucky that he got sent to Oak Ridge because that gave him that opportunity. And, a lot of people that know they're going to be convicted of these crimes will actually really try to get the insanity plea through so they can be sent to an institution and not to a penitentiary.
Yeah.
So they have this chance, right? Manipulate all the way through.
And they don't get treated much better, but the environment will be...
They have more of a chance to be released, is the thing.
Yeah.
And they're trying to, rehabilitate them mentally, and this doesn't work. I don't know. With someone who has committed such a crime, I don't know. Yeah. This is proof that it's probably not a good idea.
Yeah, I would agree. So within the first hour of this day pass, Peter convinced Dennis Kerr to meet him in the woods. And when he arrived, Peter struck him in the head with the pipe wrench, and Hamill and Peter desecrated Kerr's body amongst other crude acts.
Yeah, so again, just some of the worst things you can think of.
More evil deeds.
Oh, yeah.
So Peter walked immediately to the local police station and turned himself in. Peter was transferred back to Oak Ridge in Penetanguishene, where he would spend the rest of his life. And he passed away on March the 5th, 2010, which was his 71st birthday of natural causes.
Yeah, passed right on his birthday.
Peter never had a rational reason as to why he committed these crimes. He said in a 1993 interview, "I'm accused of having no morality, which is a fair assessment because my morality is whatever the system allows."
Yeah, and that's,
Morality is whatever the system allows.
Yeah, I mean, that's a deep thought, right?
Yeah, I guess he's saying it's more like their definition of morality and whatever his would be.
Yeah, sort of like whatever you think of me is what you think of me, so that's what it is for you. What I think of me is what it is for me, kind of thing. So it's, and also it's speaking also to the way the man dictates. It's what you think. The man dictates everything. Just goes to show, right? Just because there's something that is a blessing doesn't mean that it couldn't become a curse. Like, it's like we talk about it all the time with technology. There's certain technologies that are created for good, but they end up being used for evil. And It's like, he does some horrendous things. Just horrendous things. But had he used his brains, his smarts for good, he could have been, like a really powerful scientist. It's just, I don't know. Interesting to think about.
Yeah, it's...
What's wrong? I don't know. Something with the system, right? Like,
he must have manipulated his way through it or something to be able to, like, get away with the crimes and be found insane. Probably criminally insane, I would think.
Well, he was only tried for the case of the 4-year-old young girl, Carol.
True.
So maybe they didn't find the need to, like, he actually admitted to committing these other crimes, and they agreed that indeed that was him because it was the same sort of patterns and everything.
Yeah.
Shouldn't that have changed things though? Because then it would be almost like premeditated or planned, just the manner that he conducted these and the luring, and you know what I mean? Had he been tried for the other 2 cases, maybe he would have been sent to Kingston Pen, or, what I mean? He would have been put away for a long time, but...
At the very least, he planned. Like, he knew what he was going out on his bike to do on those nights, like...
Yeah, and even when he was released on his day pass, the first thing he did within an hour was kill somebody and actually convince somebody to help him do it. So, I don't know. That was then, this is now, I guess. System is very different now, but this is unfortunate. But interesting case, and we thought we'd just share it with you.
Yeah. So thanks for joining us, guys.
And we'll see you on the next podcast.
See you next time.
Bye, guys.